Confused.
Mad.
Isolated.
Hurt.
Sad.
Disappointed.
Terrified.
Depressed.
Scared.
I hated myself. I've been in foster care for almost 3 years.
2 years.
9 years.
4 years.
I have lived in 4 different places.
Sometimes you feel like no one would ever want you because you're in foster care.
My anxiety is always high because I don't know what's going to happen next.
I was very nervous. I didn't know how people was and how they gonna treat me.
I worry about getting rejected in friend groups.
The biggest thing I worry about is if I'm going to become my mom.
People not wanting to adopt you.
Sometimes I feel angry, like, why did this happen?
So sometimes I feel very lonely.
I grew up around a lot of violence, like people at my placement used to fight and hit people and like double team people.
Like I'm always angry because why would my parents wouldn't want me? And sometimes I'm very sad because they didn't want me, so they made the choices that they did.
I want people to get to know me better and really want them to love me.
Well, my name is Nicole Mitchell. I was in placements, 7 placements for 6 years of my life. Was taken away at 11 years of age. So my mother ended up selling my brother into prostitution. Ended up getting us all taken away. The first placement I was terrified. We were all taken into a home and, you know, I didn't have my mom. I didn't have anybody that was familiar but my sister. It just felt strange, like new faces and kids coming and going and kids struggling emotionally, and there'd be fights breaking out and kids coming with just horrible issues, like kids would be raped and kids coming in like starving and hungry, and their first meal would be that meal when they would be intaked.
I was adopted right around 2 years old, brought into foster care at a very young age. I was in a very chaotic situation with my biological mother and father. Father tried to kidnap my mother and take us into Canada, and due to some pretty extreme circumstances, the authorities got involved and kind of took me out of that situation. But as I grew up, you start to think and you start to put pieces together and start to find out, you know, these aren't my biological parents, and you start to try to put some of these pieces together.
It just didn't feel right, and I knew that I was a part of that. I tried to separate myself, making it seem as if this was not me. This was not me, but in reality, it was me. This was my new life. All I seen was brokenness, a lot of what ifs. If my father would have been present, if my mother would have been more present.
I remember going to the grocery store and thinking to myself, hey, I wonder if this cashier is my biological mother. I always had this dream of just meeting her and learning more about her and what she was all about and just where I came from.
First home I was placed in, I believe it was just all about money, and I was just a part of a paycheck, you know, like they didn't feed me. But like once a day, and you know, I complained and they put me into another foster home, and I would act out, you know, looking for different ways to be accepted. And I was so desperate just for somebody to just tell me I was good enough. Even if it was negative attention, I'd take that too. I ended up making some bad choices, so they put me in a lockdown facility to where like you have to get undressed in front of people, and it felt like prison.
When it was time for me to go to college is when it really set in, the gravity of, you know, pursuing who my biological parents were and learning a little bit more about them and kind of where I came from. And I found out my mom was manic depressive, schizophrenic, massive sexual abuse in the family. They describe my biological father as like a Charles Manson kind of guy, and they actually met in a mental institution. So sitting here reading this as an 18-year-old kid, and it crushed me. I still had that passion and desire to really meet her and get to know her, and hey, you know, that's in the past, and people grow, people change, and that was still a strong desire in my heart. I'll never forget, in the middle of that summer, going into, you know, my freshman year of college, getting a phone call, and the social worker said, hey, we've got some news about your mom. You gotta come down to our office. And we go down there, and I step in the room, and the social worker looks at me and said, you know, your mom died of cancer when you were 12 years old. You'll never get to meet her. That just crushed me, you know. It was, I was so broken, warped idea of identity and who I was, and I dealt with that brokenness in all the wrong ways, and you know, just was making mistake after mistake after mistake, and felt totally hopeless.
I was in the system until I was 17, and I ended up getting pregnant, and my biggest fear was that I was going to grow up to be just like my mom. So when I ended up having my daughter, I started seeing myself kind of slip in those ways, because that's all I knew. I didn't have my driver's license, and I didn't have my diploma. This lady came beside me. She would come every week to just disciple me and pour into me and love me. And she seen the value in me that I didn't even see in myself. And then after I got my driver's license, she's like, Nicole, did you graduate? And I said, no, I've been placed in so many homes. I never even finished, but I would love to finish, and I have a daughter. I want to be an example. I want to change this pattern. I want to be an example to my daughter. And then I ended up graduating and getting my diploma at 30 years old. I feel like I laid that foundation for her. Even though I was 30 years old, I laid that foundation for her. And I just feel a legacy totally transformed and shift.
All these question marks, and to see one of my big dreams and hopes just evaporate, it was extremely painful. And so I just got down on my knees, and I just cried out to God, and I said, God, if you're real, I don't deserve to know you, but I surely would appreciate you just reaching down on me, pulling me out of this ditch. And I got a call from my uncle Rick in Florida, and he's a pastor, and just remember hearing him tell me, hey, you know, I'd like to have you come down and just go on a fishing trip. When I saw him, he just had this jump in his step, and he had this smile on his face. And at the end of the trip, he gave me an invitation to receive Jesus as my Lord and Savior. And I received the invitation, and I came back, and I just felt a new sense of worth and value, and it just ignited a passion within me to really be the person that I think my mom would have wanted me to be.
Today I have 3 kids. They're amazing. My kids are all in school and doing great. My husband, he's been a great support through all this. And they're a huge part of also why I'm the way that I am, that I've made the change.
When I grow up, I want to be a NICU nurse or a doctor for babies. Like, babies make me very happy, and I feel like they should get help too.
I think I want to be something in music or an art teacher for elementary kids.
I hope I be really nice and care about people more and love people and help people.
Well, I want to be an engineer for other people, so when their car breaks down or when they have to get somewhere right on time, I can just help them get their car fixed.